No man in the Arizona Territory was ever tall enough to look Temperance Kell in the eye, until one climbed onto a milk crate to do it. Now she works the hard pan alone, behind a draft horse bred to haul timber, the only animal in the county that won't break beneath her. Riders come at a walk down the East Road, the kind of walk that says nothing here can hurt them. Round her throat hangs a wedding band on a leather cord, a ring that never once fit past her first knuckle, not even on the day she married. She keeps it because a 5'7" man once grinned at her like God's finest joke before the lungs took him. 2 weeks to the full moon. She wonders if any amount of time would ever be enough. Ashford Creek, Arizona Territory. Spring of 1875. The valley wakes slow. Mesquite shadows stretch long across the hard pan. Chickens scratch at the dirt. Wheat stands gold and patient in the morning wind. Somewhere a mourning dove calls twice and gives up. Looks peaceful. It is Temperance Kell is already in the field. Been there since before the sun cleared the ridge. She works the plow behind a Percheron draft horse named Ruin, 16 hands at the shoulder, bred to haul timber. The only animal in the county that can carry her without breaking down inside a mile. She learned that the hard way when she was 14. She rode her father's quarter horse into town, and the animal came up lame before they reached the crossroads, and she had to walk it home. 4 miles. Leading a limping horse, while every soul in Ashford Creek watched from the boardwalk and said nothing. They never say anything. That's the part people get wrong about being large. They think it's the cruelty. The names. Yeah. The laughing, it isn't. It's the silence. It's the way a room stops breathing when you walk into it. It's the way children go quiet and mothers pull them close. And nobody's being unkind exactly. They're just adjusting, recalculating the world to fit the thing that just came through the door. Tempe is 22 years old. She has been recalculating rooms her entire life. Her hands are what they notice first. Bigger than any man's in the territory. Wide as a skillet. Fingers thick as axe handles. She wears no rings. Never could. She wears her husband's wedding band on a leather cord around her neck instead, because it wouldn't fit past her first knuckle. And it never did. Not even on the day they married. Wesley Kell. Dead 14 months. Lungs, he was 5'7". He had to stand on a milk crate to kiss her at the altar, and he did it grinning, like it was the finest joke God ever told and he'd been let in on it. She still hears him laughing sometimes in the barn, in the dark, which is a thing she's told exactly nobody. The plow bites. The earth turns. Her back aches the way it always aches, low and deep, a grinding in the spine that started when she's a 17 and never once stopped. Her knees are worse. Her hips are worse than her knees. She's 22 years old, and she moves like a man of 60. She doesn't say that out loud either. Ezekiel Vance comes out of the barn with a rag in his hands. 48. Weathered down to leather and stubbornness. 10 years of drought carved into his face, and not one of them bent his spine. He watches his daughter work. He does that a lot. Watches. Says nothing, which is its own kind of language. If you've been listening long enough, Temp, she stops. Straightens. And straightening is a whole event with her. It takes time. Vertebrae stacking one on top of the other, like a man raising a barn wall alone. Riders Ezekiel says she turns, dust on the East Road. A rising slow, 3 of them. Riding at a walk. The kind of walk that says we are not worried. The kind of walk that says nothing here is going to hurt us. To Temp sets the plow line down. Her hand drifts to her hip. Nothing there. Not yet. Leading them is Ansel Roark. They call him Hawk, and he lets them. And that tells you most of what you need to know about a man. Silver spurs. He rides with them low so they catch the light. He has killed men for less money than a good saddle costs. And he has never once lost sleep. And if you asked him, he would tell you plain and pour himself another drink. Behind him the Pell brothers. Cade and Boone, fanning wide the way wolves do. Not hunting yet. Just measuring and at the back. Quiet, separate. Judah Gray, they call him the Shadow. 44 years old. Dark coat that seems to swallow light instead of reflecting it. He doesn't fan out. He doesn't posture. He sits his horse 10 yards behind the others, like a man attending a funeral he wasn't invited to. His saddle is old, cracked, worn down to the wood in places. He has never once replaced it. Nobody in Ashford Creek has ever wondered why. Nobody's ever had reason to. They pull up in front of the farmhouse. Roark tips his hat. The gesture looks polite. It isn't. Morning, Mrs. Kell. Tempe says nothing. She learned that from her mother. Silence carries further than words when men like this come calling. Silence makes them work. Roark lets his horse drift a step closer. He's mounted and she's on foot, and he still has to tilt his chin, and she watches him realize it. She watches him hate it, Lord above, he says, every time. Every time I forget, the Pell brothers laugh. You ever think about the sideshows back east? Roark says. Man could make a fortune. They got giants out there already. Not one of 'em's your size. He whistles. You'd break the ticket window. Cade Pell laughs harder. Tempe's face doesn't move, because here's the thing about being what she is. She has heard every joke, every single one. She heard them at 6 years old and 11 and 16. She has a filing cabinet in her chest where she keeps them all, and it is very full and very heavy, and she has never once opened it in front of anyone. Ezekiel steps forward. State your business. Roark's smile drops half an inch. Mr. Vance, Roark, lovely spread you got here. Roark looks around like a man appraising cattle. Real shame about the troubles lately. Fires. Accidents. Terrible things happening to good folks. The threat sits in the air like smoke. We're not selling, Ezekiel says. Told Harrow that last month. Telling you the same today. See, that's the thing about Mr. Harrow. Roark's horse paws the ground. He's a patient man, but patience has a bottom to it. Territory's changing. Men who don't chain with it get left behind. He pauses, or buried. Boone Pell laughs. It's an ugly sound. Like something breaking. Temp watches them, really watches. The way Roark's hand rests casual on his belt. The way Kate's eyes sweep the property, counting. 2 barns. 1 well. 40 head. The way Boone can't stop moving, can't sit still. Which means he's the one who'll draw first and the one who'll die first. And probably in that order, and Judah Gray. Sitting apart. Watching her shot for half a second, their eyes catch up. Something moves behind his face. Not cruelty. Something worse. Something like recognition. Then he looks away. Land's not for sale, Ezekiel says. Never has been. My wife is buried on this ground. That makes it holy. Roark's smile finally goes out. Your wife. He tilts his head. Cordelia, wasn't it? Tempe's hand closes into a fist. It happens without her deciding. Heard stories about her, Roark says. Some say she was quite the woman. Before the fever took her, of course. Of course. 2 words. Casual as spitting. And something in Tempe's chest goes hot and sharp and very, very quiet. You've said your piece, Ezekiel says. Now right out of course. Course. Roark gathers his reins. 2 weeks. Till the full moon. Plenty of time to make the smart choice. He turns his horse. Then stops. Looks back at Tempe. Mrs. Kell. He says it soft. Almost kind. Awful sorry about your husband. Sickly little fella, wasn't he? Consumption? Tempe says nothing. Territory's hard on the delicate, Roark says. Hard on the strong, too, sometimes. He smiles. Hard on everybody, really. Something to think on. They ride out. Dust trails behind them like a signature. Father and daughter stand in the yard until the riders drop below the ridge. Neither one moves. The wind comes up. The wheat leans. Pa? No. Ezekiel's voice is stone. We're not doing anything rash. I'll ride in tomorrow. Talk to Sheriff Barrow. There's still law in this territory. Tempe bites the inside of her cheek until she tastes copper. Because there isn't. Because she knows there isn't. Because her mother knew there wasn't 20 years ago and did something about it. And that's the thing nobody in this house will say out loud. Yes, sus. Pop. She says he goes back to the barn. She goes back to the plow. And the day grinds on. Feeding. Mending. Hauling water from the well. 2 buckets, 1 in each of those enormous hands. Water she barely feels the weight of, and knees she feels every step of normal things. Peaceful things. Her mind is a horse running. That evening after supper. After Ezekiel's boots hit the floor by his bed, and his breathing goes long and even through the wall, Temp sits by the window in the low room she's had since she was a girl. The ceiling is 6'4". She had to take the door off its hinges at 15. Because she couldn't get standing up. And her father never put it back. And neither of them ever mentioned it again. The moon comes up near full. Silver spills across the wheat. She touches the locket at her throat. Silver, worn smooth inside, a photograph. Her mother, young, smiling. Beautiful in a way that had nothing at all to do with softness. She opens it. Behind the photograph, a hollow, no thicker than a fingernail. A Key, she crosses to the corner. Kneels, and kneeling costs her a bright bloom of pain in both knees that she breathes through the way you breathe through weather. She lifts the loose floorboard. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, a wooden boxy turns click. Inside, on faded velvet, a gun belt, old leather, dark, with sweat and years and use, and two revolvers. Grips, gleaming even in the dim Cordelia Vance's Colts. Tempe lifts one, and here is where the story turns. And most folks would never notice it. And it's the truest thing in this whole little. Her hand does not fit, it never has. Her fingers wrap the pearl grip, and there's no room. Web of her thumb crushes against the frame. Her trigger finger comes in at the wrong angle. Crooked, jammed. A big man's finger in a small woman's gun. She can hold it. She can even fire it. She cannot fire it well. She learned that when she was 16. 2 months after the funeral. She took her mother's Colt out to the oak tree in the dark, and she raised it, and she couldn't hit a fence post at 10 paces. And she stood there in the moonlight, with her mother 8 weeks in the ground, and she understood. All at once, in one cold, falling piece. She cannot simply inherit this. The legend does not fit her hand. She turns the revolver over, runs her thumb across the frame, and there near the base of the grip on the underside, where a stranger would never look, the pearl has been carved, cut back, shaved, reshaped, by hand, by a chisel and a file, and about 400 hours of an old man's patience. Silas Crow did that 6 years ago, when a 16-year-old girl rode up his mountain in the dark with her mother's guns in a flour sack and her jaw set like a gate, and she said, "I can't hold them." And he took one, and he looked at it, and he looked at her hands, and he said nothing at all for a very long time. That's a whole story of its own. Tempe doesn't strap the belt on tonight. She just holds it, runs her fingers across the leather, feels the history in it, the lives saved, the justice served, the price. There's a sound outside, soft, a horse maybe, or nothing. She goes to the window, shadows, moonlight, the wheat moving, nothing, but something has shifted. She can feel it the way animals feel weather, the way her ruined joints feel rain 3 days out. She puts the guns back, covers them, sets the board. Tomorrow night she rides up to Silas. Tonight she lies awake in a bed too short for her, feet hanging off the end the way they have since she was 11. And she listens to her father snore through the wall, and her mother's voice comes up out of the dark. From before the fever, from before the grave and the silence and the 14,000 small unspoken things. The gun's not what makes you dangerous, child. Knowing when to draw it is, and knowing when not to. Temp closes her eyes. 2 weeks to the full moon. She wonders if that's enough time. She wonders if any amount of time would be. Midnight comes cold to the Arizona high country. She saddles Ruin in the dark. The big draft horse knows the routine, knows to keep quiet. They've made this ride 200 times over 6 years, always after midnight, always in secret. Horse has never once given her away. She keeps him to a walk until the farm is well behind, then lets him move. He can't lope, not carrying her, not for long. He goes at a heavy, thundering trot, and it eats the miles the way a millstone eats grain, slow, certain, absolutely unstoppable. And that's the thing about being what she is. She cannot chase, she cannot sprint, cannot dodge, cannot vanish into an alley or duck behind a rain barrel, or be anywhere without every living soul knowing she's there. She can only arrive, and she can only stay. The mountain trail winds up through juniper and sage. Coyotes yip somewhere below. An owl crosses the moon on silent wings. Silas Crow's cabin sits in a hollow, hidden from the main trails. Smoke from the chimney. Lamplight warm in the glass. She hasn't even gotten down before the door cracks. Bit late for social calls. His voice is gravel, 67 years of it, unless Roark came by today. Tempe swings down. Ruin grunts with relief. How'd you know? Saw him ride the ridge this morning. 3 vultures and a shadow. Silas steps into the light. Silver hair, back straight as a rifle barrel, which is fitting, because there's a rifle in the crook of his arm. There always is. He has never opened that door unarmed in 20 years. Come in. Coffee's hot. Inside the cabin is spare and clean and smells like oil and wood smoke. Guns line the walls, every one of them maintained with a devotion most men reserve for God. The ceiling here is 9 feet. He raised it himself 6 years ago. Took the roof off his own cabin and rebuilt it 2 feet higher. And never said a word about why. She noticed anyway. She has never mentioned it. Neither has he. Silas pours 2 cups. Black, strong enough to strip paint. 2 weeks, Tempe says. Full moon, he nods. Sets his cup down. Your mother got a deadline once. Tucson. Back in 51. Hand named Creddick wanted a piece of what wasn't his. Gave a shopkeeper 1 week to pay what he couldn't. What'd she do? Stood. His eyes go somewhere far off. Creddick came with 4 men. Cordelia was faster. 3 shots, 30 seconds. 4 down. He turns the cup in his hands. Not one bystander touched. The territorial marshal himself called it the cleanest shooting he ever saw. Tempe's heard it before. A dozen versions from a dozen mouths. But hearing it from Silas, who was there, who taught Cordelia every damn thing she knew, it goes in different. It goes in like a nail. Pa wants to talk to the sheriff. Gideon Barrow's a good man. Silas stands, moves to a locked trunk in the corner. But his hands are tied, and he knows it. Harrow's got judges. Marshals. Half the territorial government in his coat pocket. He pauses at the trunk. The half is too scared to move. He opens it. Takes out a wooden box. Temp's breath catches. Because she knows that box. She has one just like it under her floor. How your mother made 2 sets. Lifts the lid. 2 more Colts. Pearl grips. Identical twins to the ones at home. Wanted you to have options. Case 1 set got lost. Or taken. He lifts one out. Checks the cylinder without looking. And then he holds it out to her. Grip first, and Tempe stops. Because the pearl is carved aim as hers. Shaved back at the base, reshaped, filed down. A little rough on one edge, where the chisel skipped. 2 sets. Both recut. Both recut for hands that are not her mother's. Silas, when did you do this one? The old man doesn't answer right away. He looks at the fire. 6 years back, he says. Winter after she died. Nights were long. You cut both sets. I did. Before I ever came up here. Tempe stands in the middle of that little cabin with a gun in her hand that was made to fit her before she ever knew she'd need it. How did you know, she says, that I'd come? Silas Crow looks at her a long moment, and then he says the truest thing anybody will say to her in this whole bloody spring, girl. You are 2 inches tall. He takes his coffee, sips it. You were never going to get to hide. And there it is, the whole thing, laid out flat on a plank table in a mountain cabin at 1 in the morning. Other people get to choose. Other people get to be small, get to sit in the back of the church, get to slip out the side door when the trouble starts. And nobody notices they're gone, because there was never much of them to notice. Not her, not once in 22 years. She walks into a room and the room knows. She walks down Main Street and Main Street stops. When Roark burns the next farm, and he will, there is a version of this world where Temperance Kell blends into the crowd and waits it out. She is the crowd. She's taller than the crowd. 2 choices, Silas says, for folks like you. And what's the other one? He looks at her over the cup, standing still while it happens to you. Silence. The fire pops. That ain't a choice, she says. No, Silas agrees. It ain't. They go out to the range behind the cabin. Tin cans on posts. Playing cards pinned to a board. A shooting line scratched in the dirt 6 years ago with the toe of a boot and re-scratched every spring since. Temp straps on the belt. Weight settles. Familiar. Right, like coming home. Show me, Silas says. She draws smooth, fast, not thinking. Just the body doing the thing the body has done 10,000 times in the dark. The can at 20 paces comes apart, then the next. Then the next 6 shots. 6 hits. She reloads without looking down, thick fingers doing delicate work, and splits a playing card edge on with the 7th. Silas says nothing. Just watches. Again, he says. Faster. She does it again. And again and again. An hour of it. Drawing from a crouch. Drawing on the move. Shooting in bad light. Reloading with one hand then the other, then blind. And she is astonishing. Because the reach on her is impossible. The arm span. The steadiness. That much bone and muscle behind a revolver means the recoil goes nowhere. A big man fires a Colt and the barrel climbs and he has to bring it back down. Temp fires a Colt and it might as well be bolted to a rock. Second shot's always faster than the first, when the gun doesn't move, and every shot after that, finally Silas holds up a hand. Enough, she holsters. Her hands are steady. Her knees are screaming. You're faster than your mother ever was, he says. Spoopy doesn't win fights. No, he eases himself down into his rocking chair on the porch. Slow, careful, an old man's arithmetic of joints. But it don't hurt. She sits on the step. which puts her eyes almost level with his. What wins fights, he says, is this. He taps his temple, reading a man, seeing what he'll do 'fore he does it. That's what made Cordelia a legend, not the draw. The draw was just the last part. They sit a while, stars wheeling overhead. That enormous western sky. Silas, how'd she do it? All those years, knowing she might have to kill, knowing she might die. The old man is quiet a long time. He says, "Not easy, not ever." He reaches into his coat, comes out with a journal, worn, cracked leather, corners rounded soft with handling. "She kept this. Wanted you to have it when you were ready." Tempe takes it, opens it, her mother's hand, neat, small, precise as a surgeon. The first entry is dated 1851. "Today I killed a man." He was drawing on an unarmed shopkeeper. It was necessary. My hands still shake. Temp closes it. She can't read more. Not tonight. Something in her throat has gone thick and useless. And that's when the night breaks, a sound far off. Wrong. Gunfire. Silas is on his feet before the echo dies. 67 years old. And up like a man half that valley they move to the ridge. Below them, Ashford Creek spreads out in the dark. Miles of it. Farms like scattered coins. And 5 miles north, an orange glow. Climbing fire. Tempe says, Luss's jaw sets. That's the Fen place. They stand there. They stand there and watch it grow. Too far to help, too late to matter. Hollis Fen, Ruth Fen, 3 children. The youngest is a girl named Nettie, who is 9 years old, and who once, at a harvest supper 2 years back, walked straight up to Tempe Kell in front of the entire town, walked up to the giant woman everybody talks around and nobody talks to, and asked, with total seriousness, whether she could see the ocean from up there. And Tempe had said no. And Nettie had said, well, that's disappointing, and then offered her half a biscuit. Half a biscuit. Temp's hands curl into fists. We have to, can't. Silas's voice is hard as a door. By the time we get down there, they're gone. And the Fens either got out or they didn't. And you go riding into a burning farm on that horse, at your size. In the dark, every man Harrow's got knows exactly where you are and exactly how big a target you make. So I just watch. Tonight, he says. Yes, the fire burns. She can almost hear screaming. She knows it's her own head making it up. Knows that and hears it anyway. This is my fault, she says. Roark came to us first. We should have stopped. He grips her arm. This is Harrow. This is Roark, not you. His fingers dig in. Evil don't need an excuse, girl. It just needs room. They watch until the flames die back to embers. Until there's nothing left but smoke, staining the pre-dawn sky like a thumbprint on glass. You still planning to wait on the law? Silas asks. Temp thinks of her father. His faith in Gideon Barrow. His belief that things get sorted proper, through proper channels, by proper men. She thinks of her mother's handwriting. My hands still shake. She thinks of a 9-year-old girl offering her half a biscuit like it was nothing at all. No, she says. I'm done waiting. Silas nods, like he knew. Like he's been waiting 6 years for her to say it. Then we got work, he says. Real work. Your mother left more than guns, Tempe. She left a network. People, plans, evidence. He looks out at the dying fire. She left a war. And she left it to you to finish. They go back inside. He spreads maps on the plank table. Points to properties Harrow's taken. Names of men in the territorial courts. Names of men in the marshal's service. Lines of resistance drawn in a dead woman's careful hand. And Tempe listens and learns. And on the horizon, the first gray light of dawn touches the mountains. A new day, not a peaceful one. Never again a peaceful one. Ashford Creek's main street looks fine enough in the morning light when fronts. Boardwalk still dark with dew. A few early risers moving toward the general store. But there's a wrongness under it. People walk faster than they need to. They don't meet each other's eyes. Conversations stop when a stranger comes near and start up again too loud after he passes. Fear has a smell. Zealous a small town. Ashford Creek stinks of it. Temp rides in just before noon. She hasn't slept. She rode straight from Silas's cabin to the Fen place. Found ashes. Found the chimney standing alone in a black square like a headstone. Found no bodies. Which means something. She just doesn't know what yet. Then home, to tell her father what she saw. He wanted to ride for the sheriff that hour. She talked him into waiting one more day, one more. Now she's here for a different reason. The town square is packed. More folks gathered than she's seen since last year's harvest. But nobody's celebrating. There's a platform in the middle of the square. Fresh lumber. built overnight and piled on it. Everything the Fens owned: furniture, tools, a wash tub, a child's rag doll singed along one arm, everything that survived the fire. At the front of the platform stands an auctioneer Tempe's never seen, slick hair, city clothes, and next him Cyrus Harrow. She's seen him before, always at a distance, always through a window or across a street. Up close he is something else entirely. 54, silver running through dark hair, a black coat that cost more than the Vance farm clears in a year, polished boots, clean hands. He looks like a senator. He looks like somebody's respectable uncle. That's what makes him dangerous. Not the guns. The guns are Roark's department. Harrow is dangerous because he looks like the man you'd ask for directions. Ladies and gentlemen of Ashford Creek, the auctioneers of voice carries. We are gathered for a public auction of property seized under territorial statute. All proceeds to the settlement of debts owed by Hollis and Ruth Fenn, as determined by Judge Sperling of the District Court. A sound goes through the crowd. Not a shout. Worse than a shout. A murmur. The sound people make when they're angry and helpless in the same breath. Sheriff Gideon Barrow stands at the edge of the square, arms crossed, face like a closed door. Beside him, his daughter Nell, 24, fists clenched so tight her knuckles have gone white. The bidding starts. First lot. Oak table. Seats 8. Fine condition. Ezekiel Vance's voice cuts across the square. $5. Harrow turns, sees, smiles. 10, 15. Ezekiel says 30. And Harrow isn't even looking at the table. He's looking at Ezekiel. Then past Ezekiel, at Tempe, the bidding goes on. Ezekiel tries to buy back pieces of another family's life. Tools, a chest of drawers. Things the Fens might need if they ever come home. Harrow outbids him every time. Doesn't hesitate. Doesn't blink. Just raises the number like a man raising a shovel. And then he wins a lot of farm tools. The auctioneer's boy brings them forward. Harrow takes up a hoe. Studies it, turns it in his clean hands like a scholar with an artifact. And then he lifts it over his head and smashes it against the platform. The handle shatters. The crowd makes a sound. He picks up a shovel. Smashes. That's it to progress, Harrow says, conversationally, like they're discussing the weather. Requires clearing away the old. He breaks a rake. The Fens decline to understand that. They declined a generous offer for their land. He breaks a scythe. The blade rings off the boards. Now they have nothing. He drops the ruined haft, brushes his palms together, and I have their land, all legal, all proper, all signed by a territorial judge. He looks out at them. Let this be instructive. Ashford Creek is changing. Those who change with it will prosper. He gestures at the pile, those who don't. Well, Gideon Barrow steps forward. That's enough, Harrow, enough? Harrow's eyebrows go up. All injured innocence. Sheriff, I'm exercising my lawful rights as the winning bidder. You wouldn't interfere with a lawful auction. The two men look at each other. Barrow's hand hovers near his gun. And they both know he can't draw it, can't arrest, can't charge, can't do one damn thing, because the law is on Harrow's side. Because Harrow bought the law. Barrow's hand drops. He steps back, and every soul in that square watches their sheriff step back. That's the moment the town breaks. Right there. Not the fire. Not the auction. That Harrow's smile returns. He scans the crowd. And of course he finds her. Of course he does. She's a head and a half above every man there. He finds her, and something happens in his face. For a long moment they look at each other across the square. And Temp feels something cold go down her spines because he isn't looking at her the way men look at her. Not the flinch. Not the leer. Not the little recalculating stare she's known her whole life. He's looking at her like a man looking at a ghost like. He's seeing somebody else. Somebody who's been dead 6 years. He crosses the square. He crosses it slow. And the crowd opens for him. Just opens. He stops in front of her. Cyrus Harrow, king of this county, owner of judges. And to speak to Temperance Kell, he has to tilt his head back like a man admiring a church steeple. He doesn't seem to mind. That's the strange thing. He doesn't seem to mind at all, Mrs. Kell, he says. She says nothing. Your father bid today. Trying to help the unfortunate Fens, Harrow nods slowly. That's the community spirit this town needs. I do hope he shows the same wisdom regarding his own property. He lets that sit. I'd hate to see the Vance farm end up like this. It isn't a threat. Threats have doubt in them. This has none. And then Harrow does something Tempe will turn over in her mind for weeks, that she will take out and examine at 3 in the morning like a stone in her boot. He says quietly, almost gently, for her ears only, "You're tall like your mother." Tempe goes very still, because her mother was 5'6". She didn't know how to bow her head either, Harrow says. He tips his hat. That didn't end well for her, and he walks away. Delia Mott's saloon is dim and cool and smells like sawdust and beer. She's had this place 11 years. Her hair is the color of a rusted hinge and her eyes are green and they miss absolutely nothing. Tempe comes in through the front and every head turns and then very carefully turns back. Delia is polishing a glass that does not need polishing. Tempe, not a greeting, a warning. Temp glances around. 2 drunks in the corner, both face down. Nobody who matters. Need to talk. Delia studies her a long moment, then jerks her head toward the back. 2 minutes. Then you leave the alley. Back room is small. A table, chairs, crates of supplies stacked along one wall. Nell Barrow is already there. So is Reverend Amos Teague. So are 2 farmers whose land borders the Fen place, Tobias Ledger, and a man named Corwin. Delia shuts the door. Temperance Kell, she says. Meet the Ashford Creek chapter of the Guardians. The room tilts, just slightly. Just enough. The what? Your mother started this, Delia says, 20 years ago. After she watched what men like Harrow do when good people do nothing. She pulls a chain out from under her collar, a silver medallion, plain. No markings. It catches the lamplight, and Tempe sees, on the back, 3 letters scratched in by hand, C.V. Nell steps forward. My father can't know I'm part of this, she says. It had compromised the badge. Her voice is steady. The pain behind it is not. My mother died 3 years back. Harrow raised the rent on her boarding house until she couldn't pay it. Evicted her. She caught fever living in a tent outside of town. Nell's jaw works, died in my arms in October. Tempe stares at her. They played together as girls, 2 summers of it, before Tempe outgrew every game there was. Nell. I didn't. Nobody does. Pa made me promise. Said it'd look like revenge if he moved on Harrow. Her hands close, so I joined this instead. Because somebody has to. Reverend Teague nods. He's a small man, soft-spoken. The kind of man you'd overlook, which is precisely why he's still alive. Your mother believed, he says, that when the law fails, good people must build their own justice. Not vigilante justice. Not revenge. He looks at her steadily. Organized resistance. Evidence. Strategy. The long game. Harrow's been buying land 15 years, Tobias Ledger says. He's a big man, red-faced, and his hands won't stay still. Your mother documented all of it. Every bribe, every forged deed, he swallows. Every murder made to look like an accident. Murder. Tempe's voice comes out sharper than she means. Delia and Nell exchange a look. The Fen fire wasn't an accident, Delia says. We got 2 witnesses saw Roark's men in the area. Neither one will testify. Too scared. Tempe feels that hot, sharp thing turning in her chest again. My mother was building a case, Reverend Teague says. Evidence that would bring down Harrow. The judges. All of it. He pauses. She died before she could finish. Fever, Tempe says. And even as the word leaves her mouth, she hears how thin it sounds, how papery. Delia's face goes carefully, deliberately blank. That's what the certificate says. But Doc Hollowell signed it, and Doc Hollowell left the territory the following week. Moved to California. Never practiced medicine another day in his life. Delia sets the glass down. Very gently, and your mother was documenting Harrow's operation right up until the day she took sick. The room goes sideways. Temp grips the edge of the table. The table creaks. We don't have proof, Nell says fast. Just suspicion. But Tempe, we've been waiting for you. Your mother left instructions. If anything happened to her, we were to wait. Until you were ready. Until you came to us on your own. I'm not. Tempe hears her own voice break and hates it. I'm a farmer's daughter. I'm a widow with bad knees. I'm not. You're Cordelia Vance's daughter. Delia doesn't blink. And Silas Crow's been training you 6 years. Tempe's eyes come up. Don't think we don't know about the midnight rides. We're the guardians, child. Teague says gently. Noticing is what we do. We've been watching over you, keeping you safe while you learned what you'd need. A knock at the door. Everything in the room goes tight. Delia moves, opens it a crack, then wider. Judah Gray steps in. Tempe's hand goes to her hip. Nothing there. She left the guns at home, raises both hands. Empty, easy. Why are you here? Tempe says. His eyes are unreadable, dark, tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. To warn you, warn us. Harrow's moving. He's sending a summons to your father tomorrow. Or wants him at the house. Negotiations. It's a trap, Nell says. Probably, Gray agrees. But if your father doesn't come, Harrow sends men to the farm, and they won't be there to talk. Temp takes a step toward him. The floorboards complain. Why, she says. Why tell us? Judah Gray looks up at her, and something moves behind his face. That same thing she saw on the road. That thing that looked like recognition and felt like grief. 'Cause I owe a debt, he says. To somebody who's dead, he turns for the door. And debts don't die just because people do. He's going out the back, into the alley. Like water going down a drain, Delia locks the door. Can we trust him? Corwin asks. No idea, Delisa says. But it matches what we've heard elsewhere. Harrow's escalating. The Fen farm was the opening move. Tempe straightens. The ceiling here is low. She has to tilt her head. My father will go, she says. He won't let them come to the farm while I'm in it. He'll walk into that house to keep me out of it. She looks around the room. He'll try to protect me by dying, nobody argues. Then we need a plan, Nell says. Because when Ezekiel Vance rides into that trap, we need to be ready to pull him out. They work for an hour. Escape routes, timings. Who can shoot? Who can't? Where the horses go? Finally, Tempe stands. One more thing, she says. Where are the documents? The evidence my mother gathered. Delia and Teague trade a glance. We don't know, Teague admits. Cordelia kept them hidden. Said she'd leave a map. Coded. Something only someone who knew her would read right. Tempe thinks of the journal, sitting under her floorboard right now, full of a dead woman's small, precise handwriting. I'll find them, she says at the door. Nell catches her sleeve. Tempe, yeah. My mother died because she couldn't fight back. Nell's grip tightens. She didn't have the training. She didn't have the size. She didn't have anything. Her eyes are wet and furious. You do. Your mother made sure of it. Nell, don't waste it. Don't let more people die because we sat here waiting for the law to fix what the law broke. Tempe steps out into the alley. The afternoon sun is brutal after the dim. She unhitches Ruin. Mounts up, which takes a while, and which she does out of sight of the street, because she learned a long time ago what it looks like to strangers. And as she rides out of Ashford Creek, she sees Cyrus Harrow standing on the porch of his land office. Watching her, he raises a hand, almost friendly. Temp doesn't wave back. She just rides. And she feels his eyes on her back the whole length of the street. Past the church. Past the last false front. Out onto the flat. She feels them for a mile. The summons comes that night. Delivered by a boy of about 14 who will not look at Ezekiel and will not come inside and will not take the coin he's offered. Expensive paper. Elegant hand. Mr. Ezekiel Vance, I request your presence at his residence tomorrow at noon to discuss the future of your property and the well-being of your family. I trust you'll make the wise choice and attend. Respectfully, Cyrus M. Harrow Ezekiel reads it twice, sets it on the table. Pa. Don't go. It's a trap, he agrees. Then if I don't go, he comes here. Ezekiel looks at his daughter across the kitchen table. And I will not have you standing in the middle of whatever that man is planning. I can handle myself. No, his voice goes hard. Your mother died protecting this town. I won't watch you do the same. Not while I'm breathing. They stare at each other, father and daughter, both stubborn, both terrified, both pretending otherwise so hard. It's a wonder the table doesn't crack. Then I'm coming with you. Like hell, I'm coming, Tempe says, or I'm following. Your choice. Ezekiel exhales, long and slow, runs a hand through his graying hair. You're just like her, he says. You know that? Stubborn as a fence post and twice as hard to move. Good. He almost smiles. He almost does. Then he goes to bed. And Tempe sits at the table alone with a lamp burning low and her mother's journal open in front of her. She reads it all, every entry, cover to cover. 18 years of a woman's private handwriting from a shopkeeper's daughter out of Missouri, to a legend in the Tucson dust, to a farmer's wife who kept ledgers of other men's sins by candlelight while her family slept. She reads about the night Cordelia met Ezekiel. 2 lines, both of them warm. She reads about the day Tempe was born, how big she was, and how the midwife went white, and how Cordelia wrote. She came out fighting, and she has not stopped since. God help the world, she reads and reads. And near the back, on a page all by itself, Look beneath the place where I taught you to be brave. Temp closes the journal. She looks out the window. The old oak stands black against the moon, big as a church. The tree her mother first put a gun in her hands under. The tree where they spent 100 afternoons, a small woman and an enormous girl, learning the same thing over and over, knowing when to draw and knowing when not to. Beneath that tree, somewhere in the dirt, is the thing that can bring Cyrus Harrow down. Tomorrow her father walks into a trap. Tonight, she digs. Midnight finds her on her knees under the oak. The spade is a barn spade, and it looks like a garden trowel in her hand. She works quiet, careful. The moon gives her enough. Roots fight her. The ground is packed hard as a road. Her hands blister, and she keeps going. 3 feet down, the spade rings on metal. Her heart goes sideways. She clears the dirt with her fingers, big blunt fingers scraping earth away from an iron corner. A box heavy, sealed with wax. She lifts it out one hand, no shade strain, and she is aware, dimly in a corner of her mind, that most men would need to. She fills the hole, smooths it, makes it look like nothing, carries the box to the barn and buries it in the hay. Tomorrow she'll open it, after her father rides out. If he comes back. When he comes back. She corrects herself, and the correction tastes like a lie. She washes her hands at the pump. Cold water over torn blisters, and she walks back to the house. And there's lamplight in the kitchen window. She stops. She stands in the yard with her ruined hands dripping, and looks at that little square of yellow light, and she knows. She pushes the door open. Ezekiel is sitting at the table waiting, Pa. I was just, don't. His voice is quiet. That's what's terrible about it. It's so quiet. Don't lie to me, Tempe. Not after everything. I don't know I followed you. He looks up. His eyes are red. Last spring, up the mountain. Stood behind a pine and watched you shoot for 2 hours. The kitchen goes very small. I watched you draw, he says. I watched you hit 6 cans in 6 seconds. I watched you reload without looking down. His voice cracks straight through the middle. I watched you turn into her. Silence. The lamp gutters. How long, he says. 6 years, he flinches. Like she hit him 6 years. Since your mother went in the ground. Pa, 6 years you've been lying to me. I haven't been lying. I've been not telling me is lying. He stands. The chair scrapes. Ask any man who's been married 30 years, girl. Not telling is lying with extra steps. Then what should I do? Her own voice is rising now, and she can't stop it. Wait? Wait for Roark to burn us out like the Fens? Wait for Harrow to take everything? You should trust the law. There is no law. She brings her hand down on the table. The table is oak, 2 inches thick. Her father built it. It cracks, straight down the middle. A sound like a gunshot in the little room. Both of them stare at it, and Tempe pulls her hand back like she's been burned. 'Cause this right here, this is the thing. This is the thing she has been afraid of since she was 9 years old, and hugged a boy too hard at a church picnic, and heard his rib go. She is not a hero. She's a hazard. She's a woman who cannot touch the world without leaving marks in it. Pa, she says. Pa, I know, I never meant. I know that too. And Ezekiel Vance sits back down at his broken table and puts his face in his hands. And when he speaks through his fingers. She made me promise. Tempe doesn't move. That last night. When the fever had her, he doesn't look up. She grabbed my wrist hard. She was so weak by then, and she grabbed my wrist like a vise. And she said, promise me, Zeke. Keep her out of it. Let her have a normal life. He laughs. It is the worst sound Tempe has ever heard. A normal life, he says. He finally raises his head. Look at her, I wanted to say. Cordelia, look at our girl. She was already 6'2" at 16. She was already the thing every man in the county crossed the street to avoid. What normal life? What normal life was there ever going to be? Temp can't speak. But I promised, Ezekiel says. I gave a dying woman my word. He wipes his face with the back of his hand. And then I found out she'd made Silas promise the opposite. Tempe's breath stops. Train her, she told him. Make her faster than I ever was. Make her smarter. Ezekiel's mouth twists. She gave me a promise she knew I'd keep. And she gave him one she knew he'd keep. And she died knowing they'd tear each other apart. Both promises came from love, Tempe says. Her voice is barely there. They can't both be right. Maybe they can both be necessary. Ezekiel looks at his daughter across a broken table, and something in him gives way, not surrender, Sones. Something older than that. Sit down, he says. There's a thing I never told you. She sits. The chair holds. Barely. When your mother took sick, Ezekiel says, it came on in an afternoon. She was in the garden. She was fine. She was singing Tempe. That awful hymn she couldn't carry a note of. He stares at the lamp. By supper, she was on the floor. Pa. By morning, she couldn't hold a cup. He swallows. And 3 days later, she was dead. And Doc Hollowell wrote fever on a piece of paper. And I signed it. And we put her in the ground under that oak tree. He looks up, and his eyes are dry now. Which is somehow worse, Tempe. I've been a farmer 40 years. I've seen fever. I've seen typhoid, and I've seen cholera. And I nursed my own mother through the influenza in '59. The lamp pops. I have never once seen a fever that turns a healthy woman's mouth blue. The clock ticks. Out in the dark, the wheat moves. I have never believed your mother died of fever, Ezekiel Vance says. Not for one single day in 6 years. Tempe stares at her father. Then why, she says. Why didn't you? Because I promised her I'd keep you out of it, he says it plain. Flat, like reading a verdict. And chasing that would have put you right in the middle. He reaches across the broken table, and he takes his daughter's enormous, blistered, dirt-caked hand in both of his. So I chose you, he says. Every day, for 6 years. I chose you over her. He grips harder, and I have hated myself every one of those days, and outside far-off hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. Both their heads come up. The clock says 1 in the morning. Nobody rides at this hour. Nobody, less Ezekiel is on his feet. He is on hers. The horses are close now, very close. 6 of them, maybe 8, and they are not slowing down. The guns, Tempe says. Upstairs, under the front door comes off its hinges. Ansel Roark stands in the frame with a pistol, already drawn, and a smile like a wound. Evening, folks. Behind him, Cade Pell, Boone Pell. 3 more. Sorry to interrupt the family discussion. Roark steps inside. His silver spurs ring on the floorboards. But there's been a change of plans. Ezekiel moves in front of his daughter, which is absurd. Which is the most absurd thing in the world. He does not come to her shoulder. He does it anyway. He does it without thinking. Get out of my house, he says. Can't do that. Roark thumbs back the hammer. Mr. Harrow's tired of waiting. Figured we'd move the meeting up. His eyes slide past Ezekiel, up to Tempe. Also, Roark says pleasantly, we found fresh dirt under that oak tree. The kitchen goes silent. So, let's talk about what you dug up. Mrs. Kell, 6 men in a farmhouse kitchen. One of them holding a gun on a 48-year-old farmer. And behind that farmer stands a woman 8 feet 2 inches tall, with a broken table at her back and blood under her fingernails from digging in the dark. Nobody moves, because here's what Ansel Roark knows, and here's what he doesn't. He knows she's big. He does not know what she can do. Nobody in Ashford Creek knows what she can do. 6 years of midnight rides. 6 years of shooting tin cans on a mountain nobody visits. 6 years of coming home before dawn and washing the powder off her hands at the pump and going out to plow, like a woman who has never in her life fired a shot. That's the only card she's holding, and she's about to have to spend it. What'd you dig up? Roark says. Nothing. Fresh dirt says otherwise, planting. In April, Roark smiles under a tree at midnight. With a spade, Mutt, I'm a farmer. You're a liar. I'm both. Boone Pell laughs. Roark doesn't. He takes a step forward. Spurs ringing. You know what I keep thinking about? He says. Ever since this morning? Tempe says nothing. I keep thinking. That's a lot of woman. He tilts his head. That's a whole lot of woman to put in the ground. Take 3 men and a good afternoon, then bring more men. That lands. That lands and sits there. And for 1/2 second, Ansel Roark's smile goes brittle at the edges, which is when Ezekiel Vance grabs the cast-iron skillet off the stove. Old man. Bad shoulder. 48 years old and slow as a Sunday. He swings anyway. Roark ducks. Roark fires. The shot in that little kitchen is a physical thing. Hits the walls and comes back. The lamp jumps. Ezekiel spins. Goes down, red blooming across his shirt from the shoulder. Dark and fast and spressing. Pa. And Temperance Kell stops thinking, which she will regret, which she will turn over in her head for the rest of her short life. Because if she had thought, if she had waited 2 more seconds, the whole thing goes different. But she doesn't. She goes forward. And a woman that sighs, going forward in a room that small is like a barn door coming off in a windstorm. She takes Cade Pell first. Not a punch. She doesn't punch. She takes him by the collar and the belt, and she throws him, 180 pounds of man into the pie safe against the far wall. The pie safe does not survive. Neither entirely does Cade. Boone Pell swings a rifle butt at her head. She catches it, catches the rifle. One hand, and she looks at him. And Boone Pell, 26 years old, killed a man in Yuma, killed another in a card game. Outside Prescott, Boone Pell makes a small noise in his throat like a boy. She takes the rifle away from him, and then she takes his wrist, and she turns it. Bone makes a sound you don't forget. He screams. He goes down screaming and stays down. 2 men in 3 seconds. 2 in 3. And she turns for Roark and stops, because Ansel Roark is kneeling on the floor next to her father, with the barrel of his pistol pressed into the soft place behind Ezekiel Vance's ear. Now, Roark says. He isn't even breathing hard. That was educational. Tempe stands in the wreckage of her mother's kitchen with a stolen rifle in her hand and blood on her knuckles that isn't hers. And she cannot move. That's the arithmetic. That's the whole terrible arithmetic of it. She is the strongest thing in this room by a factor of 2, and she is completely, absolutely helpless. Because there's a gun against her father's head, and a bullet doesn't care how tall you are. A bullet has never cared. Bullet is the great leveler, and every giant in history has learned that, and most of them learned it lying down. Drop it, Roark says. She drops it. Kneel. She hesitates. Roark presses the barrel in harder. Ezekiel makes a sound. She kneels. It takes her a while. It always does. And the whole room watches her go down joint by joint like a cathedral coming apart. And there is not one man in that kitchen who feels good about it. Not even Roark. That's the strangest part. Not even him. They tie her hands. It takes 2 ropes. They tie her hands and they haul her out into the yard, and they throw her father over a horse like a sack of feed, with a rag knotted around his shoulder, and the blood is already coming through it, and the moon is going down behind the ridge. Roark walks up to her. You want him to live? He says. Temp says, nothing. Then you're going to cooperate. She spits in his face. He backhands her. It's like watching a man punch a mountain. Her head barely moves. He shakes his hand out afterward, and he can't hide it, and she sees him not hide it, but her lip is split. Copper in her mouth, feisty Roark says, just like your mama. He wipes his face. Shame what happened to her. Fever's a terrible way to go. He leans in close to her ear. Unless it wasn't fever at all, and everything in Temperance Kell goes still. Everything, the wind stops. The horses stop. Her own heart, for one long beat, forgets its business. What did you say? I said, as accidents happen. Roark steps back. Sickness happens. Especially to folks who ask questions. Who dig too deep. He nods at the oak tree. At the fresh dirt. Runs in the family, apparently. Tempe's mind is a house on fire because she suspected. Because Delia suspected. And Nell suspected. And her father has suspected for 6 years and never said a word. But suspicion is a thing you can put down. This is not suspicion. This is a man in her yard, at 2 in the morning, standing over her wounded father, saying it out loud like it's a joke he's told before. Your mama was building something, Roark says. Evidence. A case. Mr. Harrow couldn't have that. He mounts up, so he handled it. And they ride. The Vance farm goes black behind them. Temp rides behind Cade Pell, who does not want her there, who flinches every time the horse shifts under her weight. Her hands are bound in front of her. Her father is slung over a horse 10 feet away, and each breath he takes sounds like a man dragging a chain through gravel. 2 hours to Harrow's house. She uses them, because that's what her mother would do. That's what the journal says, over and over. In that small process at hand, you are never out of the fight, you are only out of options. And options are a thing you can manufacture if you have nighttime and nerve. Satskun Hankerty. The box is in the barn, under the hay. They didn't find it. Because Roark didn't go into the barn. Because Roark is lazy. Because Roark sent Boone. And Boone was busy getting his wrist broken. Which means they think she dug something up, but they don't know what. And they don't know where it is. Which means she has a card, and the box is locked and the key is weight. The key is around her neck, right now, in the locket. Under her collar. Under her shirt. Tempe closes her eyes and lets out a breath that shakes, because they patted her down for guns. They did not think to look for a locket, because who looks for jewelry on a woman like her? Nobody ever has. 22 years of being looked at. 22 years of never being seen. For the first time in her life, Temperance Kell thinks, maybe that's not a curse. Maybe that's a weapon. The Harrow house comes up out of the dark like a ship. 3 stories of imported stone. Glass in every window. Gardens. A fountain in Arizona in a drought year running water into the dirt just because it can. Lamps burning in every room. He's been waiting up. They drag her through halls hung with expensive paintings. Past furniture that cost more than a farm. Past a grandfather, clock taller than most men and shorter than her. Ezekiel is carried into a side room. Tempe catches one glimpse through the door, her father on a table, a doctor bending over him. Rolled alive for now, which means Harrow wants him alive, which means Harrow wants something, which means there's a trade. Good, a trade she can work with. They bring her to a study, books to the ceiling, a desk like an altar, a fire going in April because the man can afford to waste wood. And behind the desk masks Cyrus Harrow. He stands when she enters, a gentleman's courtesy. Hollow as a drum. Mrs. Kell, she says nothing. I do apologize for the circumstances. He gestures at a chair. Roark can be overzealous. Sit. I'll stand. You'll break the chair. Beat. And Tempe, hands bound, lips split. Father, bleeding one room over, feels something she absolutely did not expect. She almost laughs, because it's the first honest thing anyone in this house has said to her. I'll stand, she says in. Harrow smiles, and sits, and steeples his fingers and studies her the way a man studies a horse he intends to buy. You look remarkably like her. Don't. Same eyes. Same set of the jaw. Same absolute refusal to be reasonable. Don't talk about my mother. Why not? He tilts his head. I knew Cordelia rather well. Better than your father did in some ways. You're lying, am I? He rises, crosses to a cabinet, opens it, inside photographs. A dozen of them in tin frames, face down. He selects one without looking, like he knows exactly where it is, like he's picked it up before, many times. He holds it up for her, because her hands are tied. And Temperance Kell looks down at a photograph from 24 years ago. Tucson, 1851, a young woman, 19. Beautiful. In a divided riding skirt and a gun belt, pearl grips at both hips, her chin up, her mouth caught halfway into a laugh. Her mother at 19 years old, laughing. Tempe has never seen her mother laugh in a photograph, never once. And standing beside her, hand on her shoulder. Well-dressed, 30 years old and looking at the camera like he owns it. Cyrus Harrow. Temp's stomach turns over. Where did you get this? I took it. Harrow's voice goes soft, almost tender. Tucson. 51. Before she ruined everything, he looks at the photograph, not at her. We could have built an empire, Cordelia and I. She had the skill. I had the vision. Together we would have owned this entire territory before the war. She didn't want an empire. I know. He sets the photograph down carefully, face up. She wanted justice. He says the word like it's something he found in his soup. As if justice puts bread on a table. As if righteousness lays track and digs wells and brings prosperity to a dust heap like this. He turns. Your mother was brilliant, Mrs. Hale. She was also a child. She believed in stories. Good and evil. Right and wrong. Those aren't stories, aren't they? He moves to the window. Looks out his gardens in the dark. I built this. Not with violence. Not with theft. With vision. With the understanding that the world belongs to men. Strong enough to take it and clever enough to make the taking legal. He turns back. Your mother understood that. Once, in Tucson, and here Cyrus Harrow stops, and something changes in his face. And it is not cruelty. Tempe has spent 22 years reading faces for cruelty. She can spot it across a street, in a shadow, in a boy of 6. This isn't that. This is worship. She was magnificent, he says. Tucson, 1851, and she was picture a street, not wide, not paved. Dust the color of old bone, and the air so hot it bends above the rooftops. A dry goods store with a green awning. Inside, a shopkeeper named Wayland, who is 52 years old, and owes $140 to men who do not accept excuses. Outside, 4 men and Credit, who is the biggest, and who does the talking, and who has already decided how this ends. 2 hard men whose names nobody bothers to remember afterward, because they are dead before anyone thinks to ask, and 1 boy 20 years old, skinny, new boots, a gun belt he bought last month and has never fired in anger. His hands are shaking so badly the pistol taps against his thigh. He does not want to be here. He has not wanted to be here for 6 weeks, but he took the money. And once you take the money, there's no road back. And he is 20 years old, and he does not yet understand that there is always a road back, and it is always the hard one. Critic says, "Draw on him," and the boy draws. And that's when a woman steps out of the alley across the street. 19 years old, 5'6", pearl grips. She does not shout a warning. Warnings are for men who want to be talked about afterward. She draws 3 shots, 30 seconds, and that's the part the legend gets wrong. It wasn't 30 seconds. It was under 4. But the story grew in the telling the was a story's due. And by the time it reached Ashford Creek, it had swollen into 30 seconds. Because 30 sounds like a fight, and 4 seconds sounds like an execution. 3 men fall, and Cordelia Vance turns her gun on the 4th, the boy. And he is standing there with his pistol out, and his arms straight, and his eyes so wide you can see white all the way around. And he is not aiming at her. He is not aiming at anything. He is just holding a gun in a street full of dead men, and he is about to be one of them. And she sees it. She sees the hesitation, the doubt. She sees a boy who does not want to be here. She has half a heartbeat to decide, and she shoots the gun out of his hand. The bullet takes the pistol through the frame and takes the meat off his palm on the way through, and he goes down howling, and he is alive. Alive. He looks up at her, and later, much later, in a cabin, in a dark year, drunk enough to say true things, he will tell someone he could not decide. In that moment, whether he was looking at an angel or a demon, she stands over him. The street is silent. Wayland the shopkeeper is under his own counter, praying. Cordelia Vance holsters her right-hand Colt, and she says to a bleeding boy in the Tucson dust, "You get one chance." He can't speak. "Use it," she says, "to be better than this." And she walks away, and she never speaks to him again. Not once. Not in 24 years. But she does not forget his face. And that, right there, is going to be the whole ballgame, though nobody in this story knows it yet, least of all him. She killed 4 men to save a shopkeeper who couldn't pay his debts, Harrow says. The study, the fire, the photograph face up on the desk. 3, Tempe says. Harrow stops. "Beg pardon? You said 4. She killed 3. Tempe's voice is flat. "Everybody says 4. My whole life. 4 men, 3 shots, 30 seconds. She looks at him. "But you were there. And you're a man who doesn't make mistakes with numbers." Silence. Something moves across Cyrus Harrow's face. It's gone almost before it arrives, but Tempe sees it. "An error," he says smoothly. "Was a long time ago. Liar, 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 liar." He knows exactly how many men her mother killed that day, which means the 4th one didn't die, which means she files it. She files it in that heavy cabinet in her chest, and slams the drawer and keeps her face absolutely still. Because 22 years of being stared at has taught her one thing above all others. She knows how to hold a face. "I forgave her," Harrow is saying. "You understand? I forgave her everything." He is not really talking to Tempe anymore. He's talking to the room, to the fire, to a photograph. "I proposed to her 3 times. Tempe says nothing. 3 times. He holds up fingers, actually holds them up. "I brought flowers from San Francisco. I offered her a house land. A name that meant something." He laughs. It's not a good laugh, and she chose a dirt farmer. He turns. And the mask is coming apart now. And underneath it is a 54-year-old man who has been carrying a rejection for 24 years like a stone in his shoe. A man who could give her nothing, Harrow says. A man who could not protect her, could not even keep her alive. "You killed her." It comes out of Tempe's mouth without her permission. The room goes very quiet, the fire cracks. And Cyrus Harrow says, "I did what was necessary, that's it. That's all." 6 words. A confession delivered like a man commenting on the price of feed corn. And something in Temperance Kell tears loose. Not rage. The rage will come. The rage is coming, and it will be an ugly, howling thing. But right now it's just falling. Because there was a part of her. A small, stupid, childish part that had been holding on to fever. Holding it the way you hold a coin in your pocket. Fever is a thing God does. Fever is nobody's fault. And there's a strange mercy in nobody's fault. And now it's gone. And her mother didn't die. Her mother was killed. And she was killed in her own house. At her own table. By a man who brought her flowers. She was building a case, Harrow says. He picks up a letter opener. Turns it in the light. Ledgers. Names. Proof things I would rather not have proven. "So you poisoned her." I tried to reason with her first. He sounds wounded. He sounds genuinely, sincerely wounded. I came to her. I asked her to burn it. To walk away. I offered her again everything. The letter opener turns. She refused because she wasn't for sale. She'd already sent copies to the federal marshals. Harrow's voice hardens. She said it was too late, was it? No. He sets the opener down. The copies never arrived. I saw to it. Tempe's hands are shaking, bound in front of her and shaking so hard. How, she says, Mrs. Kell. How did you do it? And Cyrus Harrow looks at her. For the first time all night, he hesitates. It was in the tea, he says. The fire pops. I want you to understand something. His voice has gone strange, thin. I did not go there to kill her. I had it with me, yes. I had carried it for a month. But I did not go there to use it. He is not looking at Tempe now. He is looking at the wall, at nothing. I sat at her table. Your table. That table with the burn mark by the leg. Tempe's blood goes to ice. Because he's right. There's a burn mark on that table. From a lamp. When she was 7, he was in her house. He sat in her kitchen. He knew the furniture. I asked her one last time, Harrow says. I laid it all out, said Cordelia. I have spent 20 years building something, and I would trade every acre of it to have you say yes. He stops. And she laughed. The word hangs there. She didn't laugh cruelly. He says this like it matters. Like it is important the record be accurate. That's the thing. She wasn't mocking me. She just laughed. Like a woman hearing a joke she had heard before, he turns, and his eyes are wet. They are actually wet. And she said, Cyrus, you don't understand the first thing about love. The fire pops again, and I stood up, Harrow says, and I went to the stove, and I poured the tea, and I did not decide to do it until my hand was already doing it. Silence. Long. Terrible. She was dead in 3 days, he says, and Temperance. Bound. Bleeding. 22 years old, looks at the man who murdered her mother, and says nothing at all, because there is nothing. Because words are a thing for a world where words work, and this is not that world. And she has just understood that, with a clarity that is going to sit in her chest for the rest of her life. Harrow composes himself. He does it in about 4 seconds. She watches it happen. Watches him fold the grief up and put it away like a handkerchief. So he says, the documents, I don't have them. You dug something up. Yes. Where is it? In the ground, she says. Where I put it back. Harrow smiles thinly. Mrs. Kell. That was a lie so poor I'm almost offended. Then send men to dig up a whole farm. 40 acres. Let me know how that goes, Beat. You have your mother's mouth. He says, I have her guns, too. Not tonight. No. Tempe agrees, not tonight. Harrow moves to the door. Opens it. Says something quiet to a man in the hall, and then he turns back. Before you go upstairs, he says, there's a matter of your health. Tempe frowns. My what? I've sent for my physician. I'm not hurt. You are, though, Harrow says. Aren't you? And Temperance Kell feels the floor tilt. The doctor's name is Merrick. He is a small man with soft hands and a soft voice and the particular dead-eyed calm of a man who long ago stopped asking what his employer needs a doctor for at 2 a.m. He examines her in the study. She lets him. She has no choice. Her hands are tied, and there are 2 men with rifles by the door. And her father is bleeding 1 room over, so she stands there. And Merrick listens to her chest, and he takes her wrist, the pulse, and holds it a very long time. And his soft face does something complicated. And he asks her, quietly, if her hands ache. Temp says nothing. He asks if her vision has changed, if she gets headaches behind the eyes. If her back pains her. He asks if her jaw is... And Tempe, who has not answered a single question all night, hears herself say, my wedding ring stopped fitting when I was 17. Merrick nods. He does not seem surprised. He asks her to breathe. She breathes. He listens. And then he steps back. And he looks at Cyrus Harrow. And he says, there's a growth in the skull. Behind the eyes, Tempe hears this from very far away. It's what makes them grow, Merrick says. The tall ones, it doesn't stop. It's not a thing that stops. He is not talking to her. He is talking to the man who pays him. There have been cases in the journals. A woman in the Maritimes. A fellow in Kentucky. They don't. He stops. Chooses his words. They don't tend to be long-lived. Explain. Harrow says, the heart. Merrick says, it's the heart. It's an ordinary heart in an extraordinary body. It's pumping blood through twice the man it was built for. He looks at the floor. They tire. Then they weaken. Then they go, usually in the third decade. Silence, she's 22. Harrow says, yes, so-sos. Marek says, I would be surprised to see her at 35. I would be a little surprised to see her at 30. And there it is, laid out on a rug in a rich man's study in the middle of the night by a stranger with soft hands. Tempe stands very still, because she knew. That's the thing. That's the terrible, unbearable thing. She knew. She has known since she was 19. Since the morning she woke up and her hands ached so bad she couldn't close them, and she sat on the edge of a bed too short for her and looked at those hands and thought, something is wrong with me, and it is not going to get better. She never said it out loud. Not to Wesley. Not to her father. Not to Silas. Not once in 3 years. Because if you don't say a thing out loud, it's still a maybe. And now a stranger has said it out loud in front of the man who murdered her mother. And it is not a maybe anymore. And Cyrus Harrow starts to smile. Well, he says. He walks around the desk. Slowly, well, he stops in front of her. And there is something almost gentle in his face. That is the most obscene part of this entire night. Do you understand what he just told you? Harrow says softly. She doesn't answer. He told you that I don't have to kill you. He lets that land. I killed your mother because she was a threat that would last 40 more years. His voice is a lullaby. But you? You're a threat that lasts 8. Maybe less. He spreads his hands. I don't have to do a thing, Mrs. Kell. I just have to be patient. He turns away, walks back to the desk. And patience, he says, is the only virtue I've ever had. They take her upstairs. A bedroom in the east wing. Converted. Bars on the window. A heavy lock. A bed she couldn't fit in if she wanted to. They shove her inside. The lock turns and Temperance Kell stands alone in the dark. And here, right here, in this room, in this hour, is where the story could end. Because she has just been told she is dying. She has just been told that the thing that made her, the thing that has cost her every friend and every dance and every ordinary day, is also the thing that is going to kill her before she's 40. And her father is bleeding downstairs. And her mother was murdered at her own kitchen table. And the man who did it is not even going to bother killing her. Because why would he? Because he can just wait. A lesser story would have her weep. She does not weep. She sits down on the floor with her back against the wall. Because there's no chair that'll hold her. And there never has been. And she pulls her knees up. And she puts her enormous, blistered, rope-burned hands over her face. And she does the arithmetic 8 years, maybe 8 years, which means she has been dying her whole life and just found out about it. And everybody dies. And everybody is dying. And the only difference between her and every other soul in Ashford Creek is that she got told the number. That's all. That's the only difference. She got told. And her mother. Her mother got told too, didn't she? Cordelia Vance sat at that table with a cup of tea in her hand. And Cyrus Harrow across from her, and she knew she must have known, in some part of herself. In the same way, Tempe has known about her hands for 3 years. She must have known that man was going to kill her one day. And she went to table anyway. And she laughed in his face. Temp lowers her hands, because that's it. That's the whole thing. Nobody gets forever. Her mother got 37 years, and she spent every one of them like she meant it. And Tempe has been living like she has 150. Like there was always another spring. Like she could wait to be brave. Like she could hide in a wheat field for a decade and come out when she was ready. She is never going to be ready. She was never going to get to hide. Silas told her that in a cabin at 1 in the morning and she didn't hear it. She hears it now. All right, Tempe says, out loud. To an empty room, her voice is steady, all right then. And she stands up, which costs her. She stands up anyway. The door unlocks at dawn. A girl comes in. 19, maybe 20. Scared eyes, servant dress. Carrying a tray with bread and a cup of water. Mr. Harrow says you should eat. Tempe doesn't move toward it. What's your name? The girl sets the tray down. Ivy, she says. Ivy Fenn. And Temp's head comes up. Fenn, Hollis and Ruth. My folks, they're alive, barely. Ivy's voice is a scraped-out thing. They work his stables now, Salmo. Them and me and my brother Cal. He gives us just enough to live on. And he keeps us here. And he says if we run, he'll finish what the fire started. Her hands are shaking so badly the tray rattles. Ivy, don't. Ivy. Where's Nettie? The girl stops. and her face just comes apart. She's here, Ivy whispers. She's in the kitchen. She's 9 years old and she scrubs pots for the man who burned her bed. Temp closes her eyes. I'm going to stop him, she says. I promise you. Ivy laughs. It's an awful sound. Wet and bitter, and about 40 years too old for her, everybody promises. She wipes her face with her wrist. Your mother promised. Look where it got her. That lands. That lands harder than Roark's fist. Because it's true. Because it's the truest thing anybody said in this house, my father. Tempe says. How is he? Ivy glances at the door. Lowers her voice. Doctor patched him. Says the ball went clean through. He'll live if it don't turn. Small mercy. Mercy anyway, Ivy. Listen to me. No. One thing. That's all. If he finds out, he won't. Ivy fends down a leaked black room with a giant, and she is 19 years old, and she has been afraid every single day for 2 months. And she says, what? And Tempe tells her, get word to Deliamat. At the saloon, I can't leave your brother, Cal. He runs goods to town, doesn't he? Ivy goes still. How did you know that? Because Roark's men don't drive wagons, Tempe says. Somebody does. And it's not a man Harrow trusts. It's a boy he owns. Ivy stares at her. Nobody notices him, she says slowly. No, Temp agrees. They don't. She holds the girl's eyes. Nobody notices anybody they've already decided doesn't matter, Ivy. It's the oldest hole in every wall ever built. Silence. What's the message, Ivy says. Temp thinks fast, hard, careful, because whatever she says now goes through a scared girl to a scared boy to a wagon to a town full of Harrow's eyes. It has to mean nothing to everyone and everything to one person. Tell her, Tempe says, the tall one's still standing. Ivy blinks. That's it? That's it. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything, Tempe says. Go. Ivy goes. The lock turns, and Tempe stands at the barred window and looks out over the gardens, over the fountain running water into the dust, over the wall, out to the east, where you can just see, on the flat 5 miles off, a black shape against the gray. An oak tree crawl, the sun climbs. The room bakes. She rations the water. She does not touch the bread. Could be drugged, could be nothing, and she cannot afford could be. She sits against the wall, and she thinks about the number 4. He said 4 men. Everybody sends 4 and 4 men. The legend says 4 men, 3 shots, 30 seconds, and it has said 4 men her entire life, and she never once questioned it. But 3 shots, and 4 men. And she has been to Silas's range 10,000 times, and she knows in her bones that you do not kill 2 men with 1 bullet. Not standing, not in a street. So either the legend is wrong about the shots, or it's wrong about the dead. And Harrow was there. And Harrow said 4. And Harrow does not make mistakes with numbers. Unless he wanted her to hear it. No, that's too clever. That's her being clever. Men aren't chess pieces, says. Men are horses. They must mostly go where they're pointed. 3 shots. 4 men. One of them walked away. And her mother wrote in that journal she wrote it, Temper, the 2 nights ago. She read the whole thing cover to cover. Today I killed a man. Singular, a man. Not 4. Temp's eyes come open, because that's the first entry. And it's dated 1851. And it says a man, which means her mother, on the night of the most famous gunfight of her life, went home and wrote, Today I killed a man. Not 4 men, a man. She wasn't counting the dead. She was counting the one that mattered to her. And Tempe Kell sits on the floor of a locked room and thinks, what if she wasn't counting the one she killed at all? What if she was counting the one she didn't? Afternoon, the lock turns. Roark. 2 gods, alarmed. His wrist is strad. Get up, he says. Mr. Harrow wants you. They take her downstairs, not to the study, to a long room with a table and a window and her father sitting in a chair. He's awake, pale as milk, arm in a sling, bandage soaked through at the shoulder, but awake Pa Tempe. His voice is a rag. You hurt? No, you're lying. Yes, almost laughs. It costs him. Harrow comes in through a side door, fresh shirt, shaved, clean as a Sunday. Like last night was a dinner party. Good afternoon, he says. I trust you both slept. Neither one answers. I've been thinking. Harrow says, about families. He walks to Ezekiel, puts a hand on his shoulder. The wounded one. Ezekiel doesn't make a sound, which is somehow worse than if he had. About loyalty, Harrow says. About what a parent owes a child. His fingers rest there. Light. Also affects your wife chose her over her family, Mr. Vance. How did that work out? She did what was right, did she? Harrow's fingers tighten, because from where I stand, she got herself killed and left her family defenseless. Ezekiel's jaw locks. And now, Harrow says, here you both are. He releases the shoulder, steps back, turns to Tempe, so you have a choice. The same one your mother had. He spreads his hands, justice or family, ledgers or your father. He smiles. Tell me where the real evidence is and you both walk out that door, today. Free, Tempe looks at her father, at the pain in his face, at the fear he's trying so hard to hide and failing. Tempe, Ezekiel says quietly. Don't, Pa, whatever you're thinking. Don't, your father is a wise man, Harrow says. Listen to him. And Tempe stands there, and her mind is going like a runaway wagon, because think the box in the barn is a decoy. It has to be. Because her mother was not a fool. No fool buries the only copy of anything 3 feet under the one tree everybody in the county knows she loved. Look beneath the place where I taught you to be brave, beneath. But there was another line, later in the journal, halfway through, buried in a paragraph about weather. The truth is rarely where you look for it. Sometimes you must look up. Look up. Temp's breath catches because when she was 6 years old, her mother lifted her into the branches of that oak. Higher. Tempe. Brave girls climb higher. And there was a hollow in the trunk, 20 feet up, hidden by leaves. And she is now 8'2" and could not climb that tree with a ladder and a prayer. But Nell Barrow could. Nell Barrow is 5'4" and climbs like a cat and always has. I don't know where they are, Temp says. Harrow sighs. Wrong answer. He nods at Roark, and Roark hauls Ezekiel Vance out of the chair by his wounded arm. Ezekiel screams. He tries not to. That's the thing that breaks her. He tries not to, and it comes out anyway, torn out of him. And Tempe lunges and 2 guards grab her, and it takes both of them, and their boots skid on the floor. Stop. One more chance, Harrow says. Where? I don't know. Cellar. Harrow's to Roark. Let's see how long her ignorance lasts when she hears him screaming. No. And the window explodes. Glass. Everywhere. Sunlight and glass and a rifle round that takes the plaster off the far wall. Everyone goes down. Everyone except Tempe, who does not go down, who has never once gone down when she should have, and who is therefore the only person standing when the door comes off its hinges. Nell Barrow. Powder on her face behind her. Delia Mottan behind Delia Silas Crow. 67 years old. Rifle at his shoulder. Eyes like winter. Let them go, Nell says. Roark draws. Silas fires. Roark's leg goes out from under him. He hits the floor screaming. And then it's chaos. Guards pouring in from the hall. Guardians firing from the yard. Glass and smoke and shouting and the awful flat crack of pistols in an enclosed space. Temp rips free. She gets to her father, gets an arm under him, lifts him. Lifts him like he weighs nothing at all, because to her he does. Because she is what she is. And for once in her life it is exactly what's needed. Go, Delia shouts. We'll cover. They go the hall. Hall. Down the stairs. Past a grandfather clock that takes a bullet and sings like a struck bell. Out into the yard, horses. Guardians holding them. Reverend Teague with a rifle he clearly does not want to be holding. Tobias Ledger. Red-faced, wild-eyed. Get him up, Teague shouts. They get Ezekiel onto a horse. Tempe swings up on Ruin. The big Percheron is already there. Somebody brought him. And she doesn't have time to wonder who. Behind them the house. The house is burning. Temp stares. Who? Seal, Snell says, hauling herself into the saddle. Said if we're taking down Harrow's empire, may as well start with the roof. And Delia Mott. Riding hard past, grinning like a wolf. Ride. They ride away from the burning house. Through the dark. Toward Ashford Creek. And behind them, flames climb into an Arizona sky. And a rich man's monument goes up like a haystack. And Temperance Kell rides with her father slumped against her. And a murderer's confession burning in her chest, and a doctor's death sentence sitting in her ribs, and she thinks we won, we got out. Out, we burned the house. We won, and she is wrong. She is so completely, catastrophically wrong, because Cyrus Harrow is standing at his own front gate, watching his own house burn, and he is not shouting, he is not running, he is not doing anything at all. He is just standing there in the firelight, watching them ride away. And he is smiling. They take the church. Reverend Teague unlocks the heavy doors as the light comes up over the ridge. 20-odd people file in. Farmers, shopkeepers, Delia, Nell, Silas, moving stiff. one hand pressed to his side and not mentioning it. They lay Ezekiel on a cot in the back room. Doc Wright, a real doctor, a guardian, a man who has never taken $1 from Cyrus Harrow, works on him for an hour. He'll live, Wright says. He needs a week of rest. Tempe nods. She does not say what she's thinking, which is, we don't have a week, they fortify. Pews against the windows, shooters in the bell tower, riders sent to neighboring towns. And by noon, Harrow's men are in the street. They don't attack. They just surround the church. 60 of them, maybe more. Which is more than he had yesterday. Which means he's been hiring. Which means he's been ready. And Tempe stands in the doorway and watches them take positions. And her stomach goes cold. Nell, yeah, how'd you know where we were? Nell blinks. What? How'd you know to hit the house last night? How'd you know which room? How'd you know when? Nell opens her mouth. Closes it. Ledger, she says slowly. Tobias brought word. Said he had a man on the inside. And Tempe turns and looks across the church. And Tobias Ledger is standing by the font with his hat in his hands. Not sitting, not helping, just standing, and he is looking at the door. He has been looking at the door for an hour. Tobias, Tempe says. He doesn't turn, Tobias. He turns, and he is crying, silently, openly. A big red-faced farmer standing in a church with tears running down into his beard. He's got my boy. Tobias Ledger says the church goes silent. He's had him since February. Ledger's voice is nothing. Scrape. 10 years old. He's got him in a room in that house, and every month he sends me he stops. A drawing, he says. The boy draws. He sends me a drawing so I know he's alive. Nobody moves. He let you rescue her, Ledger says. He let you. He told me to bring you. He wanted you all in one place. He looks up at the church windows, at the men in the street. He wanted a barn, Tobias Ledger says. And he wanted us in it. And that's when the first fire arrow hits the roof. Not the church, the house across the street. Which is Doc Wright, that house. Which is where the wounded went. Which is where a 9-year-old girl is sleeping because Calfen did get the message through. And Delia did understand it. And last night, in the chaos of the burning mansion, 3 guardians went and pulled the Fenn family out of Harrow's kitchen. All of them. Hollis, Ruth, Ivy, Calt, and Nettie. And they put them in the safest place in Ashford Creek, which was the house across the street. Tempe is moving before she knows she's moving. Out the door. Into the street. Into open ground with 60 rifles on her. And she does not care. She does not care. She is the biggest target in the Arizona Territory, and she does not care. She hits the door of Doc Wright's house shoulder first, and it doesn't open. It ceases. Smoke everywhere. Heat like a hand. She finds Ruth Fenn, carries her out, goes back in, finds Hollis, carries them out, one under each arm, when the crowd in the church door is screaming, and Silas is firing over her head to keep the street clear. She goes back in. Ivy comes stumbling out on her own, coughing, blind, and somebody catches her. Third time, the roof is coming down, when Tempe finds her, in the back, under a table, where a child hides, 9 years old, Nettie Fenn. And Temp reaches under that table with a hand the size of a dinner plate, and she is so careful. She is so careful. She lifts the girl out and cradles her against her chest, and the girl is not moving, and Tempe turns and walks out through the fire with her. And she kneels in the street, and she lays her down, and Doc Wright is there in 2 seconds. And he's got his ear to the girl's chest, and the whole street has gone silent. And after a long moment, Doc Wright sits back on his heels, and he shakes his head. Smoke, he'll say later. It's always the smoke. Was over before the fire ever reached her, but that's later. Right now there is a 9-year-old girl in the dirt of Main Street, and there is a giant kneeling over her. And Temperance Kell puts her enormous hands on that small chest, and she pushes. And she is so afraid of pushing too hard. She is so afraid. And she pushes anyway, and nothing happens. And she pushes again, and nothing happens. And nothing happens. And nothing happens. Somebody is pulling at her arm. She doesn't feel it. Somebody is saying her name. She doesn't hear it. She kneels in the street with her hands on a dead child, and she thinks I couldn't be gentle enough. Not the fire. Not the smoke, me. I have never once in my life been gentle enough. And Temperance Kell, 22 years old, 8 feet 2 inches tall, dying, and just now finding out what that means, screams. They carry her inside. It takes 6 of them, 6 grown men to get her through the church door, because she will not leave that girl in the street. and they have to physically lift her, and she lets them, in the end, because there is nothing left in her to fight with. The doors bar. 2 guardians are dead in the street. Corwin, a young man named Becht. Tobias Ledger is gone. They find him an hour later, behind the church, with his own pistol in his hand, and a hole in his head and a child's drawing in his shirt pocket. The last thing he wrote, on the back of it, in a farmer's clumsy hand. Tell my boy I was not always this. And Tempe kneels in the aisle of a church, and she takes her mother's Colt out of the holster, and she looks at it, at the pearl grip, cut down and shaved and filed by an old man in a mountain cabin, so it would fit a hand it was never meant to fit. And she throws it. It skids tids down the aisle and hits the altar step and lies there. They've been afraid of me my whole life, she says. Her voice is wrecked. Gravel and smoke, every one of them. Since I was 6 years old, she looks at her hands. Turns out they were right. Speaks. Twat people in a church and not one of them has a word. And then boots on the floorboards, slow. An Evan, an old man's walk, Silas Crow, comes down that aisle, with one hand pressed to his side. There's a hole in him. There's been a hole in him since the mansion, and he has once mentioned it, and it is going to be a near thing. He stops beside her. He does not put a hand on her shoulder. He does not tell her it wasn't her fault. He does not say one soft word. He bends and it hurts him, and Tempe hears it hurt him, and he picks up the Colt off the altar step, and he holds it out. Grip first. Your mother knelt right there, Silas says. Temp doesn't move, right there. 19 years ago, after the Kellogg boy died in a fire she couldn't reach, his arm doesn't waver. She cried harder than you're crying. She said the same words, almost exactly the same words. The church is silent, and then she got up. Silas Crow says. He pushes the gun toward her. So get up. Silence. Temperance Kell raises her head, and her face is a ruin. Soot and tears and a split lip and 22 years of being the biggest thing in every room and never once being enough. Get up, girl, Silas says. And outside street, a voice carrying. Perfectly calm, Cyrus Harrow, send out the widow. He calls. Before sundown, the men in the church go still, send out the tall one, and the rest of you walk free. A pause, refuse. And I burn the church with every soul inside it. And the sun starts down over Ashford Creek. 4 hours. That's what a life comes down to sometimes. 4 hours and a bad choice in a church full of people who didn't ask for any of it. Temperance Kell stands up. Silas Crow puts her mother's Colt back in her hand and she takes it, and her fingers close around a pearl grip that was cut down for her 6 years ago by an old man who knew before she did. And she stands, as in the church holds its breath. You're not going out there, Delia Mott says. I am. He'll kill you on the step, he might. Tempe turns. And Delia Mott, who has stared down drunks and card sharps, and Ansel Roark himself takes half a step back. There are 22 people in this building. 4 of them are children. Silence. He's not offering me a deal, Tempe says. He's offering them one. It's a lie. Of course it's a lie. Nell Barrow's head comes up. Then why? Because I'm not going out there to surrender. Beat. Then what? Nell says. And Temperance Kell looks at the barred window, at the slats of light, at the street beyond it where 60 men are waiting, and one of them is not like the others and never has been. I'm going out there to collect a debt, she says. Cyrus Harrow stands in the middle of Main Street, which is a thing you should understand about him. He does not stand behind his men. He does not shout from a rooftop. He stands in the open, in a black coat, in the dust, with his hands clasped behind his back like a man watching a parade, because he is not afraid. Because for 24 years nothing in this territory has given him one single reason to be. The church door opens, 60 rifles come up, and Temperance Kell steps out into the light. The street goes quiet. It always does. It has done it her entire life. 22 years of rooms going quiet and streets going quiet. And now 60 armed men are doing it too. And there is a small, terrible part of her that thinks, at least I'm consistent. She comes down the church steps, slow. Because slow is all she has. Because her knees are ruined and her back is worse. And she cannot rush anywhere, and never could. She stops in the street, 15 yards from Cyrus Harrow. You came, Harrow says. I did. Alone, you said, the widow. Say that. He smiles. Are you armed? Yes. Honest, always. Your mother was too. Harrow tilts his head. Right up until she wasn't. And there it is. The hook, baited and dangling. You want to know something about her? Harrow says. And he says it loud. He pitches it loud out across the street, up to the church windows, to every soul in Ashford Creek pressed against a shutter listening. You want to know what your mother's last hour looked like? Don't answer him. Don't move, she begged. Harrow says the street holds still. The great Cordelia Vance, he lets it carry. On her knees in her kitchen, holding my coat, crying. Something is happening behind Tempe's eyes. Something red and rising. Her hand is moving. She stops it dead. 4 inches from the grip, with a will that costs her more than any fight she has ever been in. She said she'd do anything, Harrow says. She said she'd burn the ledgers. She said she'd come away with me. She said, that's enough. She said she'd leave her daughter behind. The street goes absolutely silent. And that's the shot. That's the shot he's been walking toward this whole time, and he fires it and he watches to see it land. And Tempe stands there. And her hand does not move, because here is the thing about a lie. And Tempe learns it in that street, in that second, with 60 guns on her. A lie has to be believed to work. And Cyrus Harrow has made one mistake. He has told a lie about a woman Temperance Kell knew. No, Tempe says. Harrow blinks. Beg pardon? She didn't beg. Tempe's voice is flat and it carries. You told me last night what happened. You told me yourself. You sat at her table and you asked her one more time and she laughed at you. Nothing. Nothing on his face. You told me she laughed, Harrow. And then you poured the tea. Tempe takes one step forward. The street feels it. You want to know how I know she didn't beg? Because you already told me the truth once, and a man only gets to tell it once. After that, it's just noise, silence, and Cyrus Harrow's jaw moves, just slightly. And every man in that street sees it. You want me to draw, Tempe says. I want you dead. You want me to draw first, she says. So there's 60 witnesses, says Snenning. The giant went for her gun and you were defending yourself. She holds up both hands. Enormous. Open. I'm not going to. And she turns her back on him. She turns her back on Cyrus Harrow in the middle of Main Street, with 60 rifles pointed at her spine, and she walks away. And he does not shoot. Because he can't. Because the whole town is watching. And a man who has spent 20 years making theft look legal cannot afford to shoot an unarmed woman in the back in front of the entire county. He built that cage himself, brick by brick, for 20 years, and she just walked him into it. That's the first thing Temperance Kell ever won. And it isn't a gunfight. She walks 15 yards, and she does not stop at the church. She keeps walking down the line of Harrow's men, past rifles that track her the whole way, past faces that will not meet her eyes, until she reaches the end, until she reaches a man sitting alone on a horse. Apart, 10 yards from the recette, dark coat, old saddle. Judah Gray, get down, she says, that'd be a mistake. Get down anyway. He looks at her, and Judah Gray, 44 years old, killer by trade and by habit, swings down out of the saddle. Because a woman told him to. Because he has been waiting 24 years for a woman to tell him to. He just didn't know it until right now. Say your piece, he says. Your saddle. He goes still. You've had it 8 years, Tempe says. It's cracked through the skirt. The cantle's split. Harrow pays you enough for 4 saddles, so? So why haven't you replaced it? Judah Gray says nothing. There's a seam, Tempe says. Underneath, red thread, hand-stitched. Doesn't match the leather. Doesn't match the maker. Doesn't match anything. She watches his face. You know it's there. I know it's there. How long? 7 years, and you never opened it. Judah Gray looks at the ground. No, he says. Why? Tentand the Mandal the shadow bet a woman, 8 feet tall in the middle of a street about to become a graveyard. Because I was afraid of what she put in it, he says. Tempe's breath stops. Say her name, she says. Don't say it. Don't do this. Say her name, Gray. And Judah Gray's face comes apart. 24 years of it, all at once, in a street in Arizona. Cordelia Vance, he says. And he holds up his right hand, palm. And there it is. An old scar, faded white, running clean across the meat of his hand from the base of the thumb to the side edge. The mark a bullet makes when it goes through a gun. And then through you. And it's going on, he says. 51. You were the 4th man. I was a boy. You were 20. I was a boy. Judah Gray says, and his voice breaks in the middle of it, and I was so scared I couldn't hold the gun. And she came out of that alley, and she killed 3 men in less time than it takes to say it. And she turned on me, and I looked at her, and I knew, ma'am. The way you know whether I was about to die. He is shaking, a killer, shaking in the street. And she shot the gun out of my hand. He closes the scarred fist, and she said, "You get one chance. Use it to be better than this silence." And what did you do with it? Tempe says. And Judah Gray does not answer, because there is no answer. Because he took the money, because he rode for Creddick, and then for other men, and then for Cyrus Harrow. And he has been better than this exactly 0 days, out of 8,760, and both of them know it, and it stands between them in the dirt like a third person. She saw you, Tempe says. 67. Riding through Ashford Creek with Harrow's men, he looks up sharp, 16 years later, and she knew you the second she saw that hand. She never said a word. No, she never even looked at me twice. She went into Delia's stable. At 2 a.m, Tempe says with a needle. A year after she first spotted you. A year of watching. A year of deciding, and Judah Gray stops breathing. She kept 3 copies of everything, Tempe says. Every bribe, every judge, every forged deed, every man Harrow ever killed, and every dollar he paid to bury it. Her eyes hold his. One she buried under the oak, a decoy thin, half of it worthless, meant for exactly the kind of man who'd come with a shovel. She lets that sit. One in the tree above it. The real one beat, and one, she says, in the lining of your saddle, the street, the dust. 60 men, and none of them can hear a word of this, and every single one of them is watching. 7 years, Judah Gray says. His voice is nothing. 7 years I've been riding on it? Yes, riding for that man. With the rope that hangs him under my own backside, his hand goes to cracked leather, to the seam, and I never once looked, no. She could have turned me in. He's breathing hard now. She could have walked into that sheriff's office and said, "That's the man from Tucson, that's Harrow's gun." She didn't. Why? And Temperance Kell dying, tall, alone, in the middle of a street says the truest thing anybody says in this whole story. Because she wasn't hiding it from you, Gray. He stares at her. She was giving it to you. The wind picks up. Dust moves down Main Street. She didn't spare you out of mercy, Tempe says. Mercy's cheap. Mercy's costs nothing. She takes a breath. She spared you because she bet on you. His eyes are wet. And she's been dead 6 years, Tempe says. And that bet is still sitting there. Under your saddle. Waiting. Silence. So you've got one question left, she says. And I'm not going to ask it for you. Judah Gray turns. He turns and puts his hands on that old cracked saddle. And he finds the seam and pulls red thread, hand stitched. 22 stitches, close and neat and small, made by a woman in the dark 7 years ago, with cold hands and a needle, and absolutely nothing in the world to gain from it. The letter opens, and a packet of oilcloth falls out into the dust of Main Street. And Judah Gray picks it up, and he holds it in both hands, and he starts to cry, standing there 44 years old. Ansel Roark sees. Roark, on his crutch 30 yards up the street, sees the shadow standing next to the giant with something in his hands. And he does what Ansel Roark has always done, which is the stupidest available thing at the highest possible speed. He shouts and he draws. And here is where it happens. Here Judah Gray does not draw. He is holding a dead woman's faith in both hands, and he could not reach his gun in 100 years. Temp steps in front of him. She doesn't decide to. Her body decides, and Roark fires, and the bullet goes through her coat, through the fabric under her left arm, out the back, missing meat by the width of a fingernail, and Temperance Kell draws. The colt comes up out love leather like it grew there. And here is the thing about a woman that size holding a revolver. The gun doesn't move. Recoil is a negotiation between a firearm and a body, and the body always loses. And every man who ever fired a Colt watched that barrel climb and had to bring it back down for the second shot. Not her. There is nothing to climb. She is a bolted down thing. She is a church wall with a hand. First shot. Roark's pistol leaves his hand in 3 pieces. Second shot, and it comes so fast the street hears it as one sound takes his good leg out from under him. He goes down screaming, and that's it. That's the whole gunfight. 2 seconds. 2 rounds. The fastest draw in the Arizona territory. And nobody will ever tell it right, because the ones who saw it were all looking at how tall she was. She walks over to him. Slow. Because slow is all she has. She stands over Ansel Roark, his silver spurs, his broken hands, his 2 ruined legs. And she cocks the hammer and puts the barrel on his forehead. And the street stops because they all want it. Every soul in that church wants it. Delia wants it. Nell wants it. Ivy Fenn, 19 years old, standing at a church window with her dead sister's ribbon wound around her fist, wants it more than she has ever wanted anything in her life. And Roark looks up at her. And he is not smiling now. He is a small man on his back in the dirt, looking up at the biggest thing he ever saw. And he is 29 years old, and he is about to die. And Temperance Kell hears her mother, not loud, not dramatic, just a woman's voice under an oak tree on a summer afternoon, 15 years ago, talking to a very tall little girl. The gun's not what makes you dangerous, child. Knowing when to draw it is. And knowing when not to. Temp lowers the hammer. She holsters the gun, and Ansel Roark starts to sob. My mother, she says, would give you a chance. She turns, so I'm giving you one. She walks away. Get out of Ashford Creek. And Ansel Roark drags himself to the dust and out of this story. And nobody ever sees him again. And there are men in that town who will hate her for it until the day they die. And she will let them. The federal marshal arrives at 4 o'clock, Roan Hardesty, out of Santa Fe. 12 men behind him. Badges catching the afternoon sun, and the whole street exhales. You can hear it. 100 people letting go of a breath held for 3 days. The cavalry. At last the cavalry. Harrow's men lower their rifles. Because you don't point a gun at a United States Marshal. Not if you want to keep breathing. Hardesty rides up Main Street, reins in, surveys the scene like a man reading a bill of sale. Somebody, he says, explain, and it all comes out. Delia, Nell, Gideon Barrow with his badge and his shame. 20 voices at once, and the fire, and the Fenn girl in the dirt, and the ledgers, and the poisoned tea. Hardesty listens the whole way through. NP watches him listen, and something is wrong. She doesn't know what. And it's crawling up the back of her neck like a fly. Because he isn't asking questions. A man hearing about a murder asks questions. A man hearing about arson asks where and when and who. Hardesty is just nodding, and looking at Cyrus Harrow. Cyrus Harrow is standing in the middle of the street, and he is completely calm. 60 of his men have put down their guns. His house is ash. His enforcer just dragged himself out of town on 2 ruined legs. And Cyrus Harrow is standing there, with his hands behind his back, perfectly. Calm the ledgers. Get the ledgers. Tempe turns, moves, through the crowd, up the church steps. A packet of oilcloth is in Judah Gray's hands, and she takes it and she doesn't ask. She opens it in the doorway. Paper. 50 pages. 100. Her mother's small, precise hand. Column after column, year after year. She runs a finger down the payments. Sperling, judge. 400, Kavanaugh, assessor. 150, Barrow, sheriff, nothing. Line drawn through. Approached twice, refused twice. Good man, frightened man, not for sale. And then, halfway down page 9, in ink gone brown with 6 years, Hardesty, U. Merschul, 400 a month. Since 1864, Temperance Kell stops breathing. 11 years. 11 years, the man is not coming to save them. The man has been on the payroll since before her mother started writing. He isn't the cavalry. He's the last card Aaron Harrow's. Harrow sent for him. Harrow sent for him. And that's why he's standing in the middle of the street, perfectly calm with his hands behind his back, because in about 90 seconds, a federal marshal is going to declare this whole town an insurrection, and every guardian in that church is going to hang for it. Legally, properly, with paperwork, and Cyrus Harrow will walk away. And it will all be legal. That's the thing. That was always the thing. Temp turns. The street is 50 feet away, and she cannot run. She has never been able to run. So she walks. And a woman that sighs coming down a church step is a thing that turns heads. And every head in Ashford Creek turns. When that right there, that's the weapon. She has spent 22 years hating it. Now she is going to use it. Marshal Hardesty. Her voice goes down that street like a bell in a canyon. Hardesty turns in the saddle. Ma'am, before you say anything, she keeps walking. There's a name in this ledger I think the town would like to hear. Harrow's head comes around. And for the first time, the very first time, Tempe sees it. Fear, actual fear, in Cyrus Harrow's face. Marshal, Harrow says quickly. This woman is 19 judges? Tempe says, over him, louder. And her voice fills that street the way her body fills a doorway. 2 assessors, 1 county recorder. She stops in front of Hardesty's horse. And 1 federal marshal. Silence the horse shifts. Give me the book. Hardesty says, no, ma'am, that's evidence in a federal. $400 a month, Temp says. Since 1864. The street, oh, the street. You could hear a nail drop. That's 11 years, she says. That's $52,800, Marshal. That's more than every farm on this road put together. Hardesty's hand moves toward his gun and stops. Because Silas Crow is in the bell tower. Because Nell Barrow is on the roof of the feed store. Because Judah Gray is standing at the church door with a rifle and a scars on his hand, and absolutely nothing left to lose. Because for the first time in 20 years, Cyrus Harrow's men are not the only people in Ashford Creek holding a gun. That book could say anything, Hardesty says. Dead woman's handwriting means nothing. And he's right. That's the horror of it. He is exactly right. A ledger is paper. A ledger is a dead woman's word against a living marshal's badge. When there is not in a court is territory that would hang a federal officer on the strength of a farmer's wife's arithmetic. Temp knows it. Harrow knows it. She can see him knowing it. She can see the fear draining right back out of his face, and the smile coming back, and I seen him. Voice small, cracked. From the boardwalk, everyone turns 19 years old, soot on her face. Her dead sister's ribbon around her fist. I seen him, she says again, louder, in the house. Marshal Hardesty. In Mr. Harrow's dining room. Christmas. I served him. Hardesty's face. Oh, Hardesty's face. I seen him take an envelope, Ivy Fenn says, and she is shaking. She is shaking so hard she can barely stand, and she does not stop talking. So did I, Ruth Fenn. Standing behind her daughter. Stabled his horse twice, Hollis, Fenn says. September and March, he drank in my saloon. Delia Mott says, with Harrow in the back room 4 times last year. Paid with a federal banknote. I kept it. I keep everything. He signed off on my brother's eviction, a farmer says. He signed off on mine. He told me the courthouse in Prescott lost my deed. He told me the same. One by one, the town of Ashford Creek stands up. Blacksmith. A widow. 2 farmers. A boy of 15. The man who runs the livery. The woman who runs the boarding house. 100 people who have been swallowing this for 15 years, standing up, one after another, on a street where a 9-year-old girl died this morning. And that's the thing. That's the thing nobody ever writes down. Because it wasn't the ledger. The ledger was just a dead woman's arithmetic. It wasn't the guns. It wasn't the giant. It was 100 ordinary people who finally decided not to look at the ground. Roan Hardesty looks around that street, and he sees it, and he knows. He goes for his gun. He gets it halfway out. And Temperance Kell reaches up from the dirt, because he is mounted and she is standing. And it does not matter at all. And she takes it, and she does not break it. She just holds it. She holds a federal marshal's gun hand in the middle of Main Street while 100 people watch, and she does not squeeze, and she does not twist, and she does not do one single thing except not let go. Oh. No, she says, that's all. That's the whole of it. And they take him off his horse. Judge Orrin Whitfield rides in from Santa Fe 8 days later. 61 years old. Clean hands. A reputation for being unbuyable, which in that territory, in that decade, is less a compliment than a diagnosis. He convenes court in the church. The same church Harrow meant to burn with everybody in it. The pews are still stacked against the windows. Nobody's moved them. Nobody wants to. And the evidence speaks. Cordelia Vance's ledgers. The real one. Out of the hollow in the oak Nell Barrow, went up that tree at dawn 20 feet, the way she'd climbed it as a girl, and came down with an oilcloth packet and dirt under her nails and Cordelia Vance's name on her lips. And the other one, out of a killer's saddle. 2 copies, written by hand, at night, by a farmer's wife, over 9 years while her family slept. And a third buried under the tree that Harrow's own men dug up and carried home in triumph. Half of it worthless. Half of it padding. A decoy laid by a woman who knew exactly the kind of man who would come with a shovel. That one they enter into the record too. Whitfield holds it a long moment and says, to no one in particular, she was thinking about this. Judah Gray testifies for 2 hours. He tells them about Tucson. He tells them about the money. He tells them what he did in Yuma in '66, which nobody asked about, and which he says anyway, and which will cost him 11 years in a federal prison. He says it anyway. Judge Whitfield asks him why, and Judah Gray says, "Because a woman gave me a chance 24 years ago. I'm 24 years late using it. I'd rather be late than never." Ivy Fenn testifies. Cal Fenn testifies, 19 years old, hands flat on the rail. When they ask him how the message got out of that house, he says, "Nobody looks at the wagon boy," and does not say another word. Hollis Fenn, Ruth Fenn, Delia Mott Gideon Barrow puts his badge on the table before he speaks, and does not pick it up again until the judge tells him to. The Pell brothers, taken at the county line riding hard for Sonora, testify in exchange for their necks. 34 witnesses. 15 years of theft, 4 murders, proven. And Cyrus Harrow sits in chains in a torn coat, and he does not look at any of them. He looks at Tempe the whole time, every hour of every day. At the end, Whitfield asks the defendant if he has anything to say, and Harrow stands and he says, "I loved her." The church is silent. That's all he says. That's the whole of it. Everything I built, everything I became, all of it, because of that. And Temperance Kell stands up, and every head in that church turns. "That wasn't love," she says. Harrow's eyes come up. "Love doesn't poison one's woman's tea," Tempe says. "Love doesn't burn a family out of their beds and put their 9-year-old to scrubbing pots." Her voice does not shake. "You didn't love my mother, Harrow. You wanted her. And when she wouldn't be had, you killed her. And you've spent 6 years calling that a love story, because the truth is you're a small man who couldn't stand being told no." Silence. "She laughed at you," Tempe says, "because it was funny." And Cyrus Harrow closes his eyes and says nothing more. Not then, not ever. The sentence is hanging, to be carried out in Santa Fe within the month. As the marshals lead him out, he stops in the doorway. And he looks back. "You're so much like her," he says. And Tempe does not answer him. She's done with him. She's been done with him since the street. They bury Nettie Fenn on a Thursday. The whole town comes, every soul. And they bury Corwin, and the boy Beckett, and Tobias Ledger, who they put in the churchyard with the others, over the objections of exactly nobody, because Reverend Teague stood up in front of the whole town and said a man who dies of shame has already been judged by a court higher than ours. Ledger's boy is at that funeral, 10 years old, found alive in a locked room on the 3rd floor of the mansion, 2 hours before the fire reached it, by a 19-year-old girl named Ivy Fenn, who went back into a burning house for a child who wasn't hers. He stands at his father's grave, and nobody in Ashford Creek has ever told him what his father did, and nobody in Ashford Creek ever will. Temp seeks back at the graveside. She doesn't want to. They ask her. So she does. "My mother believed," she says, "that ordinary people standing together could change the world." She looks at 4 holes in the ground. These 4 proved her right. That's all she says. That's all there is. She lays flowers on each grave, and then she lays flowers on a 5th. Cordelia Vance, 1832 to 1869. The story is plain. Her father cut it himself sills, and it costs her, and she does it anyway. "Ma," she says, "the wind moves the grass. I finished it." Silence. She stays there a while. Gideon Barrow offers her the badge in September. They're standing in his office. Morning sun through the window. The town going about its business outside, ordinary as bread. "You earned it," he says. Temp looks at the badge in his palm. Silver. "Worn." "Honest, no," she says. He blinks. "No, I can't be part of a system that let Cyrus Harrow run this county for 20 years. She hands it back. "That looked the other way while he stole and burned and killed." She looks out the window. "I appreciate the offer, Sheriff. It means more than you know." "Then what?" "Something different." They open in October the Vance place. 40 acres. A new barn, raised by 30 men in 4 days. Because when Tempe Kell put out word that she needed a barn, 30 men showed up, and not one of them mentioned that a year ago they crossed the street to avoid her. They just showed up. That's how a town says sorry sometimes. It doesn't say it, it builds you a barn. The sign over the gate reads the Vance School. The first class is 11 people, men and women, young and old. A widow from Prescott, a shopkeeper from Camp Verde, 2 brothers whose father was hanged on a forged warrant. And they all have the same look in their eyes. Silas Crow teaches tactics. From a chair. Because his side never healed right and never will. And he is 67 years old, and he is going to teach from that chair until he dies in it. Nell Barrow teaches nerve. How to think when your hands shake. How to count when you can't breathe. Ivy Fenn keeps the books. Cal Fenn runs the horses. And Temperance Kell teaches the draw. She stands in front of 11 people on a cold October morning, with her mother's colts on her hips and the sun coming up over the ridge. Most of you, she says, came here to learn to shoot. She draws. And even now, even after everything, the sound the class makes is the sound people make watching something impossible.
She holsters us.
You'll learn that, she says. That's the easy part. 4 months, and a lot of tin cans. She looks at them. Here's the hard part. She waits. Any fool can draw. The wind moves the wheat. The gun's not what makes you dangerous, Temperance Kell says. Knowing when to draw it is, and knowing when not to, she lets it sit. That's the first lesson. It's also the last one. Everything in between is just practice. Evening the oak tree. The sun going down over Arizona, the way it does out there orange, then gold, and a red so deep, the whole world looks like a coal. Temperance Kell sits with her back against the trunk, which is the only thing in the county big enough to lean on. Her father comes out and sits down beside her, slow, careful. His shoulder healed crooked and it aches when the weather turns, and he has never once complained about it in front of her. They sit for a long time, they just sit. She'd be proud of you, Ezekiel says. We built it together. That's not what I said, Temp smiles. No, she admits. It isn't. The light goes gold. Palm. There's a thing I have to tell you, and she does. She tells him about the doctor, about the growth behind the eyes, about an ordinary heart doing twice the work it was built for, about the number, 8 years, maybe less. And Ezekiel Vance sits very still, and he does not cry. Not right away. He picks up a stem of grass, turns it in his fingers. How long have you known, he says. 3 years. 3. Since my hands stopped closing, he nods. Slowly, I knew something, he says. When you were 19. You'd wince when you thought I wasn't looking. He clears his throat. I told myself it was the plow, I know. I'm a coward, Tempe. You're not, I am. His voice goes rough. I've been a coward about you your whole life. About what you were, what it meant. Every time somebody stared, I looked at the ground. He wipes his eyes with the heel of his hand. Your mother never once looked at the ground. No, Tempe says. She didn't. They sit. The stars come out 1, then a dozen. Then that huge western skull of it, the way it only is out there. 8 years. Ezekiel says, maybe that's not enough. No, it's not. That's not Tempe. It's not nearly Pa. He stops. And Temperance Kell, 22 years old, 8 feet 2 inches tall, dying, and more alive than she had ever been in her life, takes her father's small scarred hand in her enormous one. Careful, so careful. Way she has been careful with every fragile thing she has ever touched. I'm not asking for more time, she says. The wind moves the leaves. I'm just asking for enough. And Ezekiel Vance puts his head against his daughter's shoulder, and the sun goes down. And behind them, across the yard, the school stands with 11 lamps burning in the windows. And somebody out there laughs. She lived 9 more years, 1 more than they gave her, and she spent every one of them standing up. The Vance School graduated 140 people. Chapters opened in 4 territories. 2 crooked judges were unseated in that county alone, and neither one of them by a gun. Silas Crow died in his chair in 1881, mid-sentence. Teaching Ezekiel Vance outlived his daughter by 6 years, never remarried, and never once complained. Judah Gray served his 11 years, walked out of prison in 1886, rode straight back to Ashford Creek, and worked at the Vance School as a stable hand for the rest of his life. He never touched a gun again. He's buried in the churchyard, near the back. The stone says only, used his chance.